So, overdue and over budget, over and over again, is the title of an article on project management in a 2005 edition of The Economist magazine. The byline of the article reads, "Companies are increasingly keen on projects. Why, when so many fail?" Companies do appear to be keen on projects and keen on being able to successfully manage them. Project management is almost everywhere. It can be found across all business sectors, geographical regions, in training budgets, in most universities, and even in high schools. Despite all this, project failure is commonplace, and delivery of projects to cost, time, and benefit is not improving. There is trouble with projects, and it has much to do with how we define them. Now, Lyman and Kavanagh, I'll show you the book that most of this material here is from in a moment, have considered the ontological underpinnings of projects and project management using a framework of being and becoming. Now, both notions of being and becoming, and what's called being as a process of becoming and vice versa, they're firmly rooted in the philosophical works of Martin Heidegger. But simply put, a being ontology is where one thinks of the world in an objectified manner and describes it in terms of objects, states, features, artifacts, or things. Standard project management textbooks and course notes take this stance by providing a definition of the features of a project, describing the structure of project-enabled organizations, and how practitioners might use and utilize tools such as PERT and Gantt charts. The becoming ontology is where we think of the world in terms of means or processes rather than terms of end results, and where projects could be considered to be a process or a social mechanism finding meaning through the process of social learning. And this ties up with some of Andrew Sense's work. He's at Wollongong University. I'll get more to that in a moment. There are traces of a becoming ontology in some definitions of a project, and perhaps even more so for bodies of work that do exhibit large amounts of complex behavior. But this will form part of the discussion later. As Lyman and Kavanagh point out, the being ontology best describes the popular view of project management, and as Janice Thomas points out, again in the same book, it has underpinned the various definitions of the project over time. Now, why is this? I think that's a valid question to ask. Svetlana Sesmil, Damien Hodgson, Janice Thomas, as I previously mentioned, and myself, we've attempted to answer this question in two different frameworks or approaches, which offer up a somewhat similar answer, and that's what I'm going to discuss next. Now, Sesmil, Hodgson, and Thomas, they've produced what's called a fully and Heideggerian approach, and I've expressed this simply in terms of what I call an existential approach. And I have taken a Darwinian mimetic approach, which I call an evolutionary approach. The existential approach is based on the philosophical works of Michel Foucault, whose philosophical development was influenced by Martin Heidegger. Now, Foucault was, I suppose, popular and famous for his works on power and the critical studies of social institutions, including various aspects of the medical and prison system. When this approach is applied to the project, one is presented with the situation that the project is a concept that's undergone a process of naturalization, where it is considered to be universal, pervasive, and something real. Now, this view where things are real, concepts, ideas, are actual tangible things, is Heideggerian in nature. And Foucault extends Heidegger's thinking and speaks of the social mechanisms that enable this reification to take place. On the matter of the project, the process of naturalization has occurred because the project has been reified by the project management professional institutions, project management journals, project management standards, by project management textbooks and courses, and all of these need a reified being definition to claim their authority. This self-reifying, almost self-catalyzing process is an expression of Michel Foucault's existential ideas on how words or expressions are attributed meaning after the fact, after they've been uttered. And social institutions, such as the PMI, in the context of project management, further stabilize and objectify these meanings by defining terms such as project. This approach also brings to the fore how the construct of a project provides a technology for power and control over the workforce in the workplace. So coined differently, and I suppose paraphrasing Damien Hodgson, the project and the processes by which it's managed can be viewed as a version of 19th century bureaucratic processes which are steeped in coordinating and controlling activities with disciplinary powers that have a subjugating effect on the workforce. Now, the evolutionary approach is based on Darwin's scientific theory of natural selection and the evolutionary models of social and cultural information transfer. These, of course, have been advanced by various people, such as Susan Blackmore, Robert Boyle, Richard Dawkins, Dan Dennett, and Peter Richardson, to name but a few. Now, in Darwin's scientific theory of natural selection, traits that aid survival and reproduction become more common, and traits that hinder survival and reproduction become rare. However, for humans, in addition to passing on traits, practices and designs to offspring through our genes, we can also horizontally pass on traits, practices and designs through social learning, culture, imitation and instruction. In short, information can be passed to offspring from other parents, other siblings, and from other members of the community. Now, Blackmore, Dawkins, and Dennett call these viral cultural variants, they call them memes. And in a similar manner to natural selection, memes, that is, concepts, ideas, artifacts, practices, and so on, that have something about them that aids their survival and reproduction, that means causes them to be selected and passed on, become more common. Now, in this paper I called a mimetic paradigm for project management, I applied the evolutionary approach to projects and project management, and I argued that project management is a collection of related memes, the reified definition of a project being one of them, which propagate as a group by bootstrapping themselves to our Western cultural values. Now, by bootstrapping, I mean that the various artifacts or objects that assist in the reification of the project, such as the Gantt chart, make a physiological impact on the individual, which are in concert with their cultural values, and this enables them to be easily taken up. Moreover, artifacts such as the Project Management Professional Institutes, textbooks and courses act as replicating mechanisms for these artifacts and objects, spreading and reinforcing the definition of the community, definition to the community of practitioners. The evolutionary approach argues that the popular view of the project is underpinned by the being ontology, because this ontology is so dominant in the Western corporate cultural environment where projects exist, and will, in the long run, in this environment, be selected over a becoming definition. So, summary. Both existential and evolutionary approaches attempt to examine the reality of the project and why a particular being definition is so prevalent. Both approaches agree that the project is a construct. And Martin Heidegger argued that we are all at our birth thrown into the world where meaning has already been created. Using the same argument in a recent publication, Steve Patton, Damon Hodgson, Svetlana Sesmil suggest project managers are thrown into an environment where the meaning and definition of a project already exist. The evolutionary approach considers the project to be a construct in such a way that it is analogous to a piece of cognitive software or thinking tool, which is codified in language, gestures, and practices to which meaning is ascribed after the fact. The existential approach highlights how such a construct can be used to control work and control and discipline the workforce by the objectification of work, the normalization of the non-normal, and the political power of the project management professional institutes such as the Project Management Institute, PMI. The evolutionary approach highlights how the concept of the project, artifacts, and individual project manager the evolutionary approach highlights how the concept of the project affects the individual project manager.